It's that time of year again, folks. The NFL trade deadline is officially in the books. We saw some big names get moved. We saw some smaller moves get made that you might not be thinking about, but could definitely have a pretty solid impact going forward. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at every single one of these trades that got made on the day of the deadline, as well as the Kevin Byard trade because it happened relatively close to the actual deadline. And I'm going to hand out my grades for each side of the trade. We're going to take a look at both parties, why they made the trade in question, and then I'm going to tell you exactly what my thoughts are on the trade, whether I think a team got fleeced, if I think it was an even trade, all that good stuff. But before we get into that, please make sure to leave a like down below, as it helps out the channel a ton, shows your support, shows you care, all that good stuff. And also make sure to leave in the comments down below what your favorite trade of the deadline is and what your least favorite trade of the deadline is. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into talking about some of these trades. All right, so the first trade we're going to take a look at here is the Kevin Byard trade, where Philadelphia acquired safety Kevin Byard from the Tennessee Titans for safety Terrell Edmunds, a 5th-round pick, and a 6th-round pick. Now, from Philadelphia's perspective, this trade is pretty much a no-brainer, right? This is a team that is very obviously making a push for the Super Bowl. They are kind of that one piece away in their secondary. They didn't have a true standout safety. They obviously had Terrell Edmunds, who they added in the offseason, and he's not a scrub by any means, but he's not like a true game changer. He's not somebody that's going to make a massive play that you're going to think, wow, that is why Philadelphia won that game. That play really shifted the momentum. That's not what Terrell Edmunds is. Kevin Byard, however, absolutely is. This is a guy that has been a consistent ball hawk throughout his career in Tennessee. There's a reason why he's considered by many to be one of the greatest Tennessee Titans defenders of all time. So you're acquiring a guy like Byard. You're going to put him in your secondary with Darius Slay, James Bradbury, and all of a sudden the Philadelphia Eagles, who already are a super team by pretty much every metric, standard, whatever you want to call it, add another very important piece in their secondary. Byard is a true ball hawk who not only is really good in coverage, but is also more than capable of not only playing the run, but stepping up in the box to play the run. He can do a little bit of everything. He's at his best when he's playing deep, reading the quarterback, taking away parts of the field, jumping routes, things like that. And that's most likely what he's going to be asked to do the most in Philadelphia. But he can do a little bit of everything. And I know statistically speaking, he's had a down year, but he's still an incredible football player. And putting him in Philadelphia, where he's not going to be asked to be like Superman back there anymore, he has a lot more help in Philadelphia than he did in Tennessee. That's going to be incredibly beneficial for him. Now, when you look at things from Tennessee's perspective, it's kind of weird because keep in mind, we're talking about when this trade got made. Will Levis hadn't really gone crazy yet. So we're looking at a Tennessee Titans team that was really in limbo because they didn't know what was happening at quarterback. Ryan Tannehill had just gotten hurt. They want to see what Will Levis has, but they don't quite know yet. And the AFC is obviously incredibly competitive. Now, I've seen a lot of people say that the Titans should have tried to buy at the deadline and make a push. I don't see that being a realistic option for them. Jacksonville is killing it right now, and I think the Texans are pretty comfortably better than the Titans right now, so I don't see a world where they were going to buy, but I don't know. It's still tough because I guess I can kind of see the argument. I think they made the right move. I think selling at the deadline, especially with a guy like Byard, who, despite having such a deep connection to the franchise and being a franchise legend at this point, he's old, right? He's regressed in terms of production. I know I said I don't think that's a huge deal in Philadelphia, but in Tennessee, where you're asking him to be the guy in your secondary, it matters a little bit more. So the Titans get to move off an older player who is making a good bit of money. They get younger. Byard's not really in the future plans for them because they're about to start a rebuild, or, might be able to say they're in the middle of one. I think they're about to jumpstart it. They're going to make some big moves probably in the offseason, get rid of guys like Derrick Henry if he doesn't retire. You've got some older pieces on that team, and Byard was kind of like the first domino to fall there. I've also seen a lot of people talk about the price point, what Tennessee got in return for Byard being Edmunds a 5th and a 6th. And at first glance, that does seem like not a lot, and I would argue you maybe could have gotten more for Byard. But you got to remember, there probably weren't a lot of teams trying to go for Byard because Byard's great, but he's not going to be like the missing piece for most contenders. And for a team that's rebuilding, you're not bringing Byard in to be like a foundational piece, right? So Philly was really the only team that made sense to trade for him. And because of that, I understand why their price point was low, because I'm sure Philly brought that up in negotiations. So I like the move both ways. Obviously, also bringing in Terrell Edmunds, he's a little bit on the younger side. Pretty sure he's on a 1-year deal, so it's not the end of the world for Tennessee if he doesn't work out. But the way I look at this, I think Philadelphia definitely got the better end of the deal. Like I said, I think Byard's an incredible football player. I think he's still got some good football left in the tank, and I think he's going to help them tremendously. So Philadelphia, I'm going to give them an A for this trade. In Tennessee, I'm going to give them a B minus. Because like I said, maybe you could have gotten a little bit more, and it sucks that you got to get rid of a franchise legend, but I understand why the move had to be made. I just don't think it was like a home run for Tennessee in terms of compensation. So again, Philadelphia is going to get an A from me, and Tennessee is going to get a B minus. Moving over to our second trade, we've got the Seattle Seahawks acquiring defensive lineman Leonard Williams from the New York Giants for a second-round pick and a future fifth-round pick. And this trade, my opinion, at least in terms of Seattle, has flip-flopped quite a bit. When I first saw the trade, I felt like Seattle was giving up too much because you've got Leonard Williams, he's 29. He's not quite the player he once was, but the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. Now, I don't think it's like a home run trade for Seattle, but I definitely see why they made the move. So first and foremost, Seattle needs help on the defensive line. That was their biggest weakness going into the season, was their defensive line depth. They've had some injuries at edge, which is kind of exposing how weak the interior of their defensive line is outside of Draymond Jones, obviously. So going out and getting Leonard Williams, he pairs well with Draymond Jones, I feel. And the big thing here is going to be the run defense. That's kind of what you're paying for Leonard Williams right now for. Obviously, as a pass rusher, he's not quite what he once was. He's getting up there in age. He doesn't have as much juice. But as a run defender, his hand usage is still top tier in terms of like how well he's able to deploy his hands and his grip strength. And all that good stuff. And his arm length is, something that's not going to go away. I want to say he's in the 90th percentile for arm length. So you're looking at a guy who is a dominant run defender that can absolutely move people, can kind of part the Red Sea in some instances when he's facing double teams, and still has a little bit of juice as a pass rusher. He's no, ironically, his teammate Dexter Lawrence, who is shooting up rankings and going crazy with his pressure numbers as a nose tackle, but he's definitely still a really good run defender, and that little bit of pass rushing juice definitely provides some added value. So as a whole for Seattle, I think going out and getting a guy that offensive linemen really struggle to keep under control, adding that to your defensive line when you're currently sitting at the top of the NFC West is a pretty damn good move. Now, the big issue, like I said, is kind of looking at the draft compensation and what you're giving up for him, right? A second-round pick, a future fifth-round pick feels a little rich for a guy who's 29 years old, like I said, kind of on the decline of his career, and has, 2 years left on his contract, but one of them's a void year, so kind of play it however you want. The kicker here is they're paying less than $1 million for Leonard Williams this season. The New York Giants are taking on over $9 million of his $10 million contract. So that is huge. That is the big reason why the compensation's so high. Is it still a little rich for my taste? Sure. But I don't think it's the end of the world. I think the Seahawks are making a good move here. They have 2 third-round picks this year, so it's not like they don't have any mid-round day 2 picks. It's not a horrible move. In fact, I would argue it's a pretty good move. As for the Giants, this is a home run. You're getting a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick out of a guy who, again, I like Leonard Williams as a player, is getting outshined by his teammates, has, very little value on a team that isn't contending, and God knows the Giants are not contending right now, despite what their fans may have thought at the end of last year. So you're selling at the deadline. You're getting an extra second-round pick. Granted, it may be a late second-round pick, but it's still a second-round pick. And you get that fifth-round pick. Sure, you're eating the contract, but There's not a lot left on it in terms of years, so I think this is a really, really good move for the Giants and a pretty good move for the Seahawks. So I'm going to give the Giants an A+ here. I think getting that second round pick out of Leonard Williams is incredible value on their end. And as for the Seahawks, I'm going to give them a B+. Because like I said, I think Leonard Williams, a lot of people are sleeping on what he still brings to the table as a player. I did initially, I won't lie. But the more you think about it, the more you go back and you look at the tape, I think Leonard Williams still has a bit of a spark that's really going to be able to help out the Seahawks defense this year. All right, next trade on the docket, we've got the Philadelphia Eagles sending defensive tackle Kentavius Street and a future 7th-round pick to the Atlanta Falcons for a 6th-round pick. And I'm not going to sit here and talk your ear off over Kentavius Street. Sorry to all my Kentavius Street stands out there. I know you exist. Listen, if you're a real Kentavius Street fan, let me know in the comments down below. We cannot let the Kentavius Street fandom die, all right? But in all seriousness, he's not a bad football player by any means. Like, Kentavius Street is a perfectly fine depth defensive tackle. He had 3.5 sacks last year. He's coming off his most productive year by far. I think he's got, 6.5 career sacks. Like, he's not anything crazy, but as a depth defensive lineman, he's fine. And in Philly, he wasn't seeing the field. He's only played 87 snaps this year. He's buried behind the behemoths that Philadelphia has in Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and Fletcher Cox. And, the list goes on and on and on. He just wasn't getting any PT. So from Philly's side of things, you're saying, hey, this guy's not getting any play. Let's ship him off for something, right? He's on an expiring contract. They signed him to a 1-year deal. He's going to walk in the offseason. You might as well get some value. So you get a 6th-round pick. And, with Howie Roseman, with how much of a genius and a guru and a straight-up wizard he's turned into, maybe he'll turn that 6th-round pick into a better Kentavius Street. And on the Falcons side of things, obviously Grady Jarrett just got hurt. He's out for the year. You need some depth on the defensive line. I think Street might actually start for them, which if he does is fine. I'm not saying that's like the end of the world for them, but you are adding a nice defensive piece there. And if I'm not mistaken, the Atlanta Falcons' current defensive coordinator was the Saints' defensive coordinator last year. And that means Kentavius Street is going to play with the defensive coordinator that got the most productive season out of him in his career. So who knows? Maybe Kentavius Street's in for a little bit of a back half of the season breakout. Keep your eyes peeled. But in all seriousness, this is a good trade both ways. Neither team's really losing anything too bad. Neither team is taking a massive risk. I would say for Atlanta, this is a very low risk, medium reward type of trade. And for Philadelphia, there's no risk involved. So I'm going to give both teams an A here. Both Atlanta and Philadelphia are doing the right thing with this trade. Both teams are benefiting from it. This is one of those trades where it's a straight up win-win. I don't think you can argue either way. I've seen some people trying to be different, being, giving Atlanta a bad grade for trading away a 6th-round pick for a depth player. Weird. I've seen some people trying to give Philly a bad grade for trading away a depth player. Weird. Both teams did perfectly fine here. Both teams are doing exactly what they should be doing here. I think this is a good trade both ways. And I'm honestly, because of stuff like that, excited to see what Kentavius Street is going to do in Atlanta. We will be watching. We will be seated. And we will be watching Kentavius Street for the remainder of the season. All right, next up on the docket, we've got the Chicago Bears acquiring defensive end Montez Sweat from the Washington Commanders for a 2nd-round pick. We're going to talk about the move first, and then we're going to talk about the caveats that are going to come with the grade that I'm going to assign at least the Bears. I think the Commanders are pretty solidly where they need to be here. I shit you not, while I was editing the Montez Sweat clip that you're about to watch, the Bears extended him to what do we got here? It's a 4-year, $98 million deal worth $72 million guaranteed. So everything I'm about to say about caveats and, if Ryan Poles can extend Montez Sweat, then this is a fireable offense. All of that is still true. If he didn't pull off this extension, it would have been a fireable offense, but he did pull off the extension. Is it an overpay? Sure, but it's not the end of the world. I think it was worth it. You got to lock up Montez Sweat. You put yourself in a kind of tough situation, although it was a trade that needed to be made because the Bears had nothing on their defensive line, especially at the defensive end position. So just keep in mind all of the stuff I'm going to say about caveats and asterisks and things like that. Ignore it. I would have just edited it out of the video, but it kind of ruins the flow and, it makes some of the cuts awkward. So I figured I'd just throw this little disclaimer in at the beginning. That way, anyone with any sort of critical thinking skills will know that I'm fully aware that Montez Sweat got extended, and that helps out this trade grade a good bit. So, like I said at the very end, I'm going to give the grade, and I'm going to say, but there's an asterisk next to it. Ignore that. Montez Sweat got extended. Good shit. But looking at the Bears specifically, this is a move for the future, right? I've seen some people questioning whether or not this move makes the Bears think they're going to make a push. Whether or not this is the Bears buying at the deadline to try to make that back season push. I highly doubt it. I highly doubt it. The Bears are currently 2-6. They don't know what the hell's going on at quarterback, and they have one real defensive end on the roster. And that defensive end just came to Chicago. So I don't think anyone in the building thinks they're making a push for the playoffs, right? This is a move that says, okay, we have the worst pass rush in football. Our best edge rusher is Yannick Ngakoue, and while he's cool, he's not someone you foresee in your future. There's a reason he's a journeyman. He's a fun spark plug for a season, a Band-Aid. He's not a long-time asset. Montez Sweat is going off of his rookie contract. He's only 27. You can get another 4 or 5 years of good edge play from him. So the Bears are looking at this like, okay, we're going to get our guy now. We will pay him in-house, and that way we don't have to hope that someone might enter free agency. We don't have to hope that, in the second round, we can maybe hit on an edge rusher, right? I'm going to be 100% transparent here. I haven't scouted the incoming rookie class yet, so I don't know what the edge rushers in the second round look like. But, listening to the guys that I respect and I listen to, they're saying that none of them are going to be better than Montez Sweat. And quite honestly, even if there's some guy that's like a crazy prospect, there's no guarantee that they're going to be good in the NFL, right? Every draft pick is a lottery ticket. Montez Sweat is an established, proven edge rusher. This is a guy that is currently top 10 in sacks. He's 8th in sacks, actually, with 6.5 sacks. And he's one of the best, if not the best, run-defending edge in football. He's absolutely incredible. His combination of length, strength, and speed is off the charts. And like I said, he's only 27. He's not at that point where he's teetering off the edge of his prime. In fact, he's right smack dab in the middle of it. You've got another 4 to 5 years of productive edge play. And right now, he can be a good low-end one. And, when it's all said and done, he'll be your number 2. He'll be the Robin to your Batman, even though right now he's going to be asked to be a number 1, which I think is totally fine when you're not trying to compete, when you're still in that rebuild. In this way, the Bears don't have to take a gamble at edge this offseason. They don't have to hope a guy hits free agency, like I said. They've got a guy in the building, and anything else they get is bonus. They can worry about the edge possession not next year, but the year after, because this year they're going to have to draft a quarterback, and their other top pick, unless, the stars align for them to get in like the low top 10, they're probably not going to take an edge in the first round. This gets them out of that. They can go offensive line. They can take Mr. Marvin Harrison Jr. if God wills it, They are in a good spot. Now, all of that goes out the window if Montez Sweat doesn't re-sign. Straight up. If he decides, I don't want to be in Chicago, which is certainly possible, he was convinced he was going to Atlanta. Atlanta had a trade in place for him, and Chicago swooped in at the last second, gave the Commanders a better offer. If he decides he does not want to be a Chicago Bear at the end of the season, not only is this one of the worst trades we've seen in recent deadline history, but this is a fireable offense. You fire your general manager the day he decides he's not re-signing. The day. Ryan Poles gets his ass out of Chicago. Everything he's done beforehand, I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding his moves. I like the majority of what he's done. It doesn't matter. If Montez Sweat decides he's not going to re-sign, you trade away a second-round pick for a half-year rental, get your ass out of Chicago. Go work at McDonald's. Like, straight up. Do I think that's going to happen? No. However, it does put the Bears in a weird position where Montez Sweat has a ton of leverage. I don't think he's going to demand, like, Nick Bosa money, thankfully, probably more along the lines of like what Rashawn Gary just got. I think he's worth that. Is he as good as Gary? No. But Gary also took a slight pay cut because of coming off an ACL tear. He hasn't been super productive the last couple years. Montez Sweat, he has been productive. So it works out. From the Washington side of things, because they made this move and another move that we're going to talk about here shortly, I'm kind of in a weird spot. A second-round pick is good value for Montez Sweat, don't get me wrong. And if reports are to be believed, the Commanders did initially want to keep Sweat and trade away Chase Young, but, the offer was too good, so they couldn't do it. I understand that, they want to rebuild. They're trying to start over. I get that. Getting rid of both your edge rushers is concerning, to say the very least. So it's a weird evaluation in terms of grading this trade because of that. However, looking at it at face value, you're trading away a guy on an expiring contract for what will probably be a top 35, top 40 pick. That's good value. So it's tough. It's a weird evaluation both ways. There's a lot up in the air. For Chicago, I'm going to say an A with an asterisk. If the Bears don't extend Sweat, this is an F minus, a Z, whatever you want to call it. Just F for fired. We'll call it that, right? And the Commanders, I'm going to give this an A minus, just because I think this is really good value for Sweat. But the fact that they've left themselves with no viable edge rushers is concerning. But overall, I think both teams did pretty damn good here. Moving on over to our next trade of the deadline, we have the Arizona Cardinals sending Josh Dobbs and a 7th-round pick to the Minnesota Vikings for a 6th-round pick. Now, I want to get something out of the way real quick. Josh Dobbs is not a good NFL quarterback. I feel bad for the guy because he gets traded every 5 minutes or has to move every 5 minutes. It's like as soon as he settles down, it's off to somewhere else, right? But let's not act like he's some legit good journeyman. This isn't Ryan Fitzpatrick. This isn't Josh McCown. Josh Dobbs is a backup level quarterback, right? He had a couple fun games with the Cardinals early on. They looked competitive. That was great. The last couple games he's played in, the Cardinals have been terrible. He's looked terrible. He's not a good quarterback. This is not a move that saves the Vikings' hopes after losing Kirk Cousins to a really unfortunate season-ending injury. This is, okay, we need to bring another name into the locker room. Josh Dobbs is smart. He can learn a playbook quickly, and he's got a little bit of juice, which is cool. That's good. But that doesn't mean this is like some home run trade for the Vikings. Their prayers are answered. They're going on a run. There's just another quarterback in the room. So I like Dobbs. I would love for him to prove me wrong. I don't have a stake in the NFC North right now as a Bears fan. So if the Vikings want to go on a little run, by all means, right? And if Josh Dobbs can take them on that, good for him. Because I'm rooting for Josh Dobbs. But he doesn't move the needle. He doesn't move me. This trade does not move me for the Vikings. See, I'm actually a big fan of Jaron Hall, the rookie out of BYU, who is going to be their starter this week. And I would love for him to come out and ball out and the Vikings to be like, okay, let's see what this kid has. Because I was big on Jaron Hall coming out. He was my QB 4 or 5. I can't remember which. I want to say 4. And I was a huge fan of his. I'm really upset he got drafted by the Vikings as a Bears fan, but I do think there's something there. I think there's juice there. He's got a good arm. He's really good at throwing off different angles. He's able to move. He doesn't turn the ball over. There's good athletic traits there. Sure, he's a little undersized and there's some injury concerns, but I like Jaron Hall. As for Josh Dobbs, what he's bringing to the table is he can move a little bit too, and he's good for big plays. He's not afraid to get aggressive. He's not afraid to take shots downfield. And when, I don't know what the situation with Justin Jefferson's injury right now is, we're going to say when he comes back, he could be a fun quarterback for him because he can just say, you know what, screw it. Jefferson's down there somewhere. We're going to hit him. And Jordan Addison too, for the same regards. So I don't love this on the Vikings side of things. It's not like a bad trade. It's a low risk. You're trading a 6th-round pick, whatever, right? So I'm going to give them a B+. It's fine. The Cardinals, though, I really like that they were able to get value out of Josh Dobbs. I think that's pretty impressive. Kyler Murray's about to come back. You can try out Clayton Tune, and I'm pretty sure Jeff Driscoll's there too. So you've got other quarterbacks. The season is not going anywhere. You're currently sitting with the 1st overall pick. You probably want to keep that. So, cool, right? The Cardinals get value. I'm going to give them an A. I think this is a better trade for them just because they managed to get value out of Josh Dobbs. Again, I'd love to be wrong about what Dobbs brings to the table, but he just doesn't really move the needle for me, and I don't think he's going to do anything crazy for Minnesota this year. We're going to go ahead and knock out the other Minnesota trade. This one, they sent Ezra Cleveland to the Jaguars for a 6th-round pick. And starting out with Minnesota's side of things here, I really like this trade for them. Dalton Risner has looked great. I think he is definitely a better player than Ezra Cleveland right now. And because he's a little bit older and he's kind of been around a little bit more, when it comes contract time this offseason, because both of them will need new contracts in the offseason, they're both slated to hit free agency, I think Reisner's going to be cheaper. So you've got a guy who's going to be cheaper, he's playing better, and he was an immediate impact when he stepped into Minnesota. I think they made the right call keeping Reisner over Cleveland. And that's not necessarily a slight at Cleveland. I don't think he's like a terrible guard. He's certainly a serviceable starter. I know he's a PFF darling. I don't care about PFF grades, but, he's solid, right? He's a starting caliber football player. So you're not getting a ton for him, but he's on an expiring deal. He's, extra goods, excess goods. That's the word I'm looking for there, the phrase I'm looking for there. So you're getting some sort of value out of a guy that would just walk in free agency, and, that's a trend with these trades, so that's good. And then on Jacksonville's side of things, you need help on the offensive line. Can't even name who their guard opposite Brandon Sheriff is right now. Maybe that's ignorance on my part. But Brandon Sheriff has missed a little bit of time himself. So the Jaguars get some needed help on the offensive line. The Vikings get rid of some excess goods. They're committing to Dalton Risner. I like this trade both ways. I'm going to give both teams an A here. I think they're both benefiting. The only thing I can say is maybe you can look at this as Minnesota putting all their eggs in one basket. If Risner decides in the offseason he doesn't want to come back, then Minnesota's kind of shit out of luck at guard. I don't think that'll be the case. I'm sure they'll get something done there. Especially with Kirk's injury, I doubt he's going to want to leave Minnesota. I feel like he'll probably want to go back. That's a whole other thing. I don't know why I'm bringing that up, but I think it's a really good trade both ways. Next up, we've got the Detroit Lions acquiring wide receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones from the Cleveland Browns for a future 6th-round pick. And I'm going to tell you up front, I love this trade for Detroit. I absolutely love it for Detroit. This is a team that really needed a true vertical threat, right? Your number one receiver is Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he's great. He's not a vertical threat. He is a true slot receiver, and that works for their offense. You have Josh Reynolds, who is a fine number 2, number 3 type of guy, but you don't have that true deep threat. It was supposed to be Jameson Williams, but he just straight up has not caught on. He has not been what they wanted him to be. Donovan Peoples-Jones, that is exactly what he is. He's a really, really solid deep threat in the vein of like a Darnell Mooney, right? I like that fit a lot for Detroit. For Cleveland, I understand why they wanted to get rid of him. You've got a ton of receivers. He's dropped in production, not because he's bad, just because you have so many mouths to feed, and the way this offense is ran, guys like Elijah Moore have just taken over and gotten more reps. And now when you have a guy like Cedric Tillman that you spent a 3rd-round pick on, you want to get him involved, and you can't get him involved with Donovan Peoples-Jones on the roster, so you deal him away to Detroit. Detroit gets a really nice deep threat to add to their roster. I think this is another trade that's a legit win-win for both teams. And to, sweeten the deal a little bit more, he's from Detroit. So he gets to go home. He's playing for the Lions, the team that he might have grown up supporting, rooting for. I think that's pretty cool. That doesn't factor into the grade, obviously, but it's still cool. It's the icing on the cake, right? So I think, the Lions adding a guy who's coming off an 800-yard receiving yard season with 3 touchdowns, and the Browns moving off of somebody for some sort of value, especially this is another situation where he's going to be a free agent in the offseason. I think this is a good trade for both teams. I'm going to give them both an A-. This isn't like a home run because he's going to hit free agency. We got to see what Detroit's going to do with that. And the Browns, while they are opening up their offense, I do think Donovan Peoples-Jones is still a guy that could have found a role in Cleveland if they could have gotten the ball rolling. It doesn't help that they have nothing going on at quarterback, obviously, but still a really good trade. I think both teams are benefiting equally from it, and it makes me happy that that's how I feel about a lot of these trades. I don't feel like there's a lot of one-sided trades. I don't feel like there's a lot of, discrepancy in that. I think everyone kind of made out pretty good at the trade deadline, and this is a really good example of that. All right, here we go. The penultimate trade. We've got the Green Bay Packers sending cornerback Rasul Douglas and a 5th-round pick to the Buffalo Bills for a 3rd-round pick. And I'm really conflicted with this trade because Rasul Douglas is a really weird player at this point in his career. He's pretty much what people used to try to say Trayvon Diggs was, where he's super aggressive and all he cares about is forcing turnovers and attacking the ball, so he leaves a lot to be desired in like straight up coverage. That is Rasul Douglas at this point. And I understand why in Green Bay you'd want to get rid of a guy like that because you've got some younger guys that you can kind of work in there. This team season is over. Green Bay is not going to do anything this year. I feel confident in saying that. I know that's crazy coming from a Bears fan, but trust me, neither of our teams are going anywhere this year. So Green Bay, they're moving off of an older asset, getting some draft capital back, which kind of scary that they got a 3rd-round pick. We know Brian Gutekunst is not the best at drafting in the 3rd round, but that doesn't matter for our grade here. But they're getting rid of Rasul Douglas, who is unfortunately a pretty big team leader. They're moving off of him to get draft capital. That's fine process, fine value. As for the Bills, Trey White's gone for the season. He's hurt again. Very unfortunate. You need some help in the secondary. If the rumors that the Bills were going aggressively at Jalen Johnson are to be believed, then I think this is a pretty solid consolation prize for Buffalo. Is Rasul Douglas as good as Jalen Johnson? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. They're not the same type of corner even. However, Rasul Douglas can add that kind of it factor to your defense, right? I know a lot of people talk about that with quarterbacks, but with Rasul Douglas, he makes a lot of plays that, he just seems to be in the right place at the right time in big moments. Whether it's a pick to end a game or a big pass deflection on 3rd and long or breaking up a pass on 4th down or something like that. He just always seems to know where the best place for him to be is. And I think that helps. I think that's something that Buffalo can absolutely use. This is a team that is trying to win a Super Bowl this year. Their window is very weird. I feel like we're getting close to it closing, but I say that every year, and they just keep playing good. So I don't know what the hell to make of Buffalo's Super Bowl window. But either way, you're adding a guy to your defense who's really good at forcing takeaways. You're already top 10 in takeaways. I like this move both ways. I don't think this is a game changer for either team. I don't think Green Bay got insane value for Rasul Douglas. And I don't think Rasul Douglas is the missing piece Buffalo needed to be a championship roster. But I do like this trade both ways. So I'm going to give the Bills a B+, and I'm going to give the Packers an A-, just because I feel like the Packers did a better job of getting value out of a guy that really is not providing their roster a ton right now. And Buffalo, it's not a slight at them. It's a little rich for my taste to give up a 3rd-round pick for Rasul Douglas. Even though you're getting that 5th-round pick back, still not in love with it. And finally, we saved the best move for last, the biggest move of the NFL trade deadline. The Washington Commanders sent defensive end Chase Young to the San Francisco 49ers for a 3rd-round pick. I still can't believe this happened. I was in shock when I got this notification. I'm still kind of in shock sitting here looking at it on my screen. It's insane that this happened. However, I do think there's a lot of misconceptions going on with this trade, a lot of things that people aren't understanding. So we're going to get into that. But first of all, looking at this trade at face value, specifically for the 49ers, this is incredible. They're doing the exact same thing they did at the trade deadline last year. We remember they traded for Christian McCaffrey. He elevated their offense tenfold. He was that big missing piece they needed, and he helped them make a deep playoff run. Chase Young, same type of move. Do I think he's going to be as impactful as McCaffrey? Not quite, primarily because I'm not fully convinced he's going to be in San Francisco past the back half of this year. We'll have to see on that. But I do love this move. We have Chase Young in arguably the best season of his career, at least the best season since his rookie year. Obviously, he dealt with some injuries. He wasn't quite himself. Now he's top 10 in pressures with 38, putting him at 9th in the league. He has 5 sacks on the year. He's been a really good run defender. Chase Young's looked awesome this year. And you're pairing him up with Nick Bosa, his former college teammate, one of the biggest mentors for him as a football player. Oh my God, this is incredible. Now, I will say, there are apparently some behind-the-scenes things going on with Chase Young, a lot of questions about his maturity. Now, I know this happens all the time. Take it with a grain of salt, but I do have to bring it up because I do think it explains a bit why Washington was so eager to move on from him. Washington said that this move to them was addition by subtraction, which is really interesting when you have a defensive end that is having a career year at such an important position that you invested such high draft capital in. It's really interesting, like I said, to hear that type of language used when referring to this type of player, right? So I'm not going to sit here and say that Chase Young's like some piece of shit, and that's final. However, there's questions about how, much of a team player he is. Some stuff about him purposefully abandoning assignments and trying to do things to make himself look better as a player at the expense of, setting up his teammates like he's supposed to, or doing what he's supposed to, or following the coach's direction, just doing things to kind of pad his stats, right? There's been some rumors about that. Don't know how true it is. We'll have to see. I'm not going to take that and like throw it in and knock the 49ers for making this trade, because we know the 49ers, if nothing else, are a defensive end rehabilitation team. So if there are these issues with Chase Young, I don't think they'll matter in San Francisco. Now, if they were a thing, it changes how much I like the trade for Washington. Because giving up Chase Young for a third round pick is tough. Because of the potential he has, because of how good he's looked this year. I understand the injury concerns. I completely do. I understand the lack of historic production. I absolutely do. That's why I'm glad the Bears didn't trade for him, because it would have been a lot riskier than going after Montez Sweat. And that is why Montez Sweat went for more than Chase Young. Montez Sweat is an established player. There's no injury concerns. There's no consistency issues. There's no lack of production. All of that is there with Sweat. It's not here with Chase Young, and that's why there's the difference in their value. However, trading away both your edge rushers, like I said earlier, is really risky and really scary. So if there are these behind-the-scenes issues, I don't want to call them character concerns, behind-the-scenes issues with Chase Young, then it makes this easier to swallow for Washington. So I'm going to kind of give my grade for what it is if these rumors are true, and if they're not, we'll put it that way, kind of play it safe. So for the 49ers, this is just straight up an A. Like, this is awesome. Him and Nick Bosa. Joey Bosa also played a role in mentoring Chase Young. That's where that came from, obviously, and also the brother relationship. But Chase Young and Nick Bosa together are going to be awesome. As for the Commanders, if these off-the-field issues are real, if it's a legitimate thing they were dealing with, he wasn't getting along with coaches, all that good stuff, then this is a B-. It's not fantastic value, but you're getting value for a guy who was creating a disturbance. You're getting value for a guy that probably wasn't going to be on the team next year. That's great. On the flip side of things, if this isn't the case, this is like a D+, because Chase Young should have been the guy you kept around, should have been the guy you're trying to build around, because this team is about to enter a full-scale rebuild and Chase Young's only 24. I understand the money might be an issue. Doesn't matter. Blow the team up. If Ron Rivera gets fired at the end of the year and you don't think Sam Howell's your guy, you can blow the team up, right? So it's tough. I think this is probably the most lopsided trade of the deadline. It's very obvious that San Francisco is getting the better end of the deal, but what can you do? But anyways, that's going to do it for my 2023 NFL trade deadline grades. I hope you all enjoyed. Please make sure to let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are. Do you agree with my grades? Do you disagree? Do you think I'm a genius? Do you think I'm a moron? Somewhere in between. Would hope it's somewhere in between. Please let me know down in the comments below, and also make sure to leave a like down below, as it does help out the channel a ton. It shows your support, shows you care, all that good stuff, motivates me to make more and more content. I'm trying out a bunch of different formats, a bunch of different things. We're going to see what sticks. I'm really trying to figure out, get my footing, get my bearings here with making YouTube videos, kind of what kind of content I want to make. Who knows, maybe I'll just be a straight up variety football channel. I think that would be pretty cool. And make sure to subscribe as well to see where all of that takes me. We do film reviews. We've done a couple video essays. I plan on doing more videos like this. Hopefully we'll be talking about the draft in the offseason. I've got an NFL iceberg video I'm starting to work on. Just a ton of fun football content coming from yours truly. And if nothing else, subscribe for the robe. Like, can we just take a moment? Can we get some commotion for the robe? Let me know down in the comments below how much you love this beautiful soft pink robe that I got from Walmart for $30. Um, but anyways, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. And to everyone out there watching, I hope you all have a wonderful day, evening, night, afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you. I hope you enjoy it because you're all wonderful people and you deserve it.